Hey guys, Lou Perez here with We the Internet TV, and today we're taking a break from our regular programming to do our very first live stream in studio. And we put a panel together. We're going to be talking about how politics are affecting comedy. Wonderful. Over here on my right, you may recognize Boris Khaykin. Boris has been in a bunch of We the Internet videos. He's a stand-up comedian, a writer, a director, and some of our biggest successes and biggest failures are because of this man. Thank you, Boris, so much. To my left, we have Justin Williams. Justin Williams is a stand-up comedian as well as a history professor. Lovely. And next up, we have Anna Roisman, a comedian, writer, and producer. And coming in from Skype is the amazing Nick Gillespie from Reason Magazine and Reason TV. So just to start things up, so I remember a couple of years back, we all remember when Donald Trump was elected president, and I was seeing a bunch of these articles saying, what does a Trump presidency mean for comedy? So we're a couple of years in, so what has Trump meant for comedy? And Nick, why don't you start us off?
Sure. I think Trump has, on balance, been terrible for comedy because he is the amount of cheap laughs that he has generated for people who are part of the resistance, one way or the other. And when you look at the shows like, Samantha Bee's, even Stephen Colbert, I'm a huge fan of Stephen Colbert, and I thought the Colbert Report was fantastic. But you can just kind of shrug and like, this guy's hair, this guy's dick, whatever. You can just make cheap jokes. And I think overall it's, it's had a negative effect on comedy because it's an easy reach for too many people and too many kind of cheap laughs.
Cool. Boris, what do you think?
I agree with some of that. I think there's an opportunity, though. You just have to find a new context. I think everybody's really divided, and comedy requires some sort of shared reality in order to do a joke. Like when you do a setup, it's based on some sort of information that everybody agrees on. And so if you have a lot more that people disagree on, either you're only going to set up your jokes based on the piece of information that everybody agrees on, or you're going to find something else outside of politics or outside of the reality where everybody's getting their news from different sources and stuff like that they can joke about. So I think there's a way to bring people together by focusing on the stuff that people can agree on, or the bad part that Nick is talking about, where people just get siloed more because it's really hard to make jokes from a left-wing perspective. If there's right-wing people in your audience, it's really hard to make jokes. And honestly, it's hard to make jokes from a neutral perspective because people are coming at it with stuff that they can't even handle a neutral perspective on it because they have such a context that pulls towards the left or to the right. So I think he's right, but I think there's opportunities to go around it. It's just that a lot of people aren't taking that opportunity.
Right. Justin?
Yeah. Well,
sorry, you were just about
Can I just jump in real quick on that too? Of one of the other, I think one of the big problems. I agree with that. And there's a ton of great comic material, both in terms of scripted shows as well as stand-up and stuff. But it also, Trump has politicized people so that you have a lot of people who weren't necessarily that political, acting as if suddenly they give a crap about policy. And, Trump is so dangerous and so awful that we got to do something else. And I find that kind of lamentable because the fewer people who care about politics, probably the better. I mean, that's the libertarian in me speaking. The world is more interesting away from politics. And generally speaking, comedy is funnier when it's not simply about, Donald Trump or Washington, D.C., for that matter.
Yeah, it's sort of like I'm imagining a whole generation of Mort Sauls, like with the newspaper open, just doing, comedy.
We're the worst.
Everybody watching this show right now has no idea what that reference is, but that's right.
Can I say something similar to what Nick is saying? I just feel like Trump has made everyone a comedian, right? Like people, especially you go on Twitter and everyone now has a joke. People who've never made jokes before are like, well, because he's president, I'm a funny person now. I can make the same jokes, and it's oversaturated. Like you're saying, people, you see too much of it. People are getting up at open mics who've never done comedy before, but they feel this pressure because he's the president that yeah, I have so much material now, right? I'm one of these comedians, and it's no, you're not. You didn't do this before.
Yeah, it's one of the great things about social media, but also one of the negative things in that when you have, you used to have like the professionals who would get up and tell jokes and all that, and now you have millions upon millions of people who are able to even just scoop you on a joke too.
Yeah.
I wonder how many jokes that have been done on late night have already been, just hacked to death.
Yeah, it's hard.
Twitter,
it's hard to write a new joke about it. It's already written. Like, you don't even have to write the joke anymore, kind of. It's like...
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you saying, like, it's like, in one sense, because, like, I'm a political comic, and, like, there was political comedy before Trump, and, like, yeah, it's the exact same observation. It's like people that have never read a newspaper are trying to, like, talk policy on stage now, and it's, like, always just, like, Trump is bad, and it's like, okay, that waters it down. But the inverse of it is that Trump is so effective at what he does that, like, I'm like a comic based in the East Coast, but I'm from the middle of the country and I work the middle of the country, and what Trump has done is made it kind of impossible to work the middle of the country in so many ways, because politics always divides the room, but if you do it well, you can pull it off in a divided atmosphere. Trump has made it to where no one can compromise. Trump, in the way that if you say anything that's remotely critical of the left for a leftist audience, they don't want to hear it. So, for instance, one joke I do in New York City is about, yeah, it's really terrible considering Donald Trump is born and raised and only lived in New York City. You're responsible for this, right? They don't want to hear that. And the same way, if you say anything that indicates that Donald Trump isn't normal at all, like you realize he just said one thing and then said the other thing, people will get up and walk out because they see it as an attack on them.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely notice it with the videos that we put out, where depending on which video someone sees of ours first, like the first video they see of ours, they will make all these sweeping assumptions about where we stand politically. And it's become such a personalized reality that we live in, where the idea is if you point out that Trump, his hair or his hands or whatever whichever way the wind's blowing on that, if you point that out, the person reading it takes a personal offense to that. Or if you point out like, Trump actually didn't actually say this, then they take a personal offense to that as well, depending on where where they stand.
They're not even listening half the time. Like they're waiting. They're just assuming as soon as you throw out like something, they're gonna offend you. Like.
Well, that's where I think actually like people use the word trigger to mean a different thing now. But for me, like when I'm doing stand-up, there are certain words that like not trigger like somebody who's easily offended, whatever, but where someone won't hear the rest of what you're trying to say because there's such a strong correlation between those words or those phrases that like they just tune out to whatever the rest of it is. To what you were saying, like the day after he was elected, I toured the South, and like I don't do political comedy in that kind of way. I like to talk about politics, but to either like just pick the stupidest perspective or just joke about something that neither side is expecting so that it actually does kind of bring people together without saying anything political. I think the difference is like you're able to do it because you're like a very smart guy and you're able to talk about politics. And I think what happens is, like you said, everybody starts talking about it, and the intellectual threshold for doing good political comedy is like people are like, oh, comedians are some of the smartest people. No, they're not. I know some people who are hilarious and who are stupid as shit.
Yeah, we're not that smart. Yeah.
Well, some are, but like to do good political comedy, the world's a complicated fucking place. It's hard enough, like, managing your own life and your family's life and like whatever, and now you're gonna manage how like you can't pay your bills. You're gonna manage how like the national economy should be. Like maybe make jokes about something.
Right, something that's relatable to you. You don't have to give the people what you think they want.
Right, but then everybody starts talking about it because the intellectual threshold for like making jokes about Trump's hair or his hands is much lower than the intellectual threshold for making jokes about how our society should structure itself.
Yeah, I find that a lot of times, rather than approaching an actual like topic or a policy, it's more fun to attack how people respond to that or respond to that person. So I have a bit that I do about this one, a buddy of mine who's like, oh, look at Trump. He's so fat and ugly. It's like, dude, you guys have the same body type. Yeah. But at least Trump's 72. You're 30 years old. Right. Like, you're disgusting. Get your shit together, man.
And I don't think, even if you're a critic of Trump, it's just like that too. It's like the physical appearance attack that would never be okay in any other context.
Right. I mean, that one's funny to me though, because people, like, I could just stay out of it and watch people who normally agree on everything, and then one person makes fun of him for the way he looks, and then the person's like, actually, that's ableist and whatever else. And then it's just like, you can just stay out of it and watch people destroy each other who are technically on the same side of the political spectrum.
Yeah. Hey, Nick, what do you think about this whole idea of everything being political now, like everything personal is now politics. I think a little while back, Michael Ian Black, the comedian, originally from The State and Stella, he went on Twitter and said that, like, everything you do is political. Do you see that as a thing?
I think that's a real tendency, and that's an old slogan from second wave feminism: the personal is the political, and there's a lot of power to that and a lot of truth. The idea that and I mean, we saw that play out yesterday on a certain level in the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, but how you treat people in your personal life should also reflect your kind of political commitments. At the same time, there is something truly kind of terrifyingly totalitarian about that, where everything you do, I mean, if you're a man and you sit or stand while you take a pee, is that a political statement? And once everything becomes politicized, I mean, again, politics ruins pretty much everything it touches, because politics tends to be winner take all, and all you need is, and I mean, the Trump haters are feeling this right now. They won the popular vote, and they have to put up with Donald Trump and with Republicans running everything. I don't think we really want to live in a world where everything is politicized, and that's a choice that we can step out of. Doesn't mean that there are places where we can be horrible human beings or anything like that, but God forbid. I mean, the Soviet Union actually used to try and shut down, more than rock and roll, more than Elvis and the Beatles. They tried to shut down absolutely innocent, like teeny bopper songs that were simply about like innocent love, because it was apolitical. And that was the one thing that the Soviets couldn't abide, a space of human activity that had no political impact. I'm kind of hoping for that space.
Yeah, I wonder how the Soviets would have, if they would have liked the movie Footloose. It's just like no dancing allowed. If the comrades would have been able to come together on that.
I can tell you, someone.
The Russians know how to dance. Give them that much,
Well, as a man who was in the Soviet Union during that time, I will say,
this is not Yakov Smirnoff.
No.
And another reference that nobody watching this will get.
No, I can dance, and also we did not have Footloose in Soviet. There were like a few movies that leaked into the Soviet Union. I don't know if they had any correlation as to why they leaked. It was just people who snuck it in. But to what you were saying about everything being political, I think it is sort of like a difficult choice that people need to just consciously make of like when to decide to look at things politically and when to not. Because like you said, it's a powerful way of thinking and it's not wrong, but for the wrong people, I can see people just not being able to handle life if they look at everything that way. Like there's people who can no longer cope with the reality that we're living in, which is like you're not going to be able to help anyone and you're not going to be able to fix anything if you've use this as a way to like no longer be able to relate to people.
Yeah, and I think recently, I don't know if it was today, but someone tweeted out, divorce your Republican spouses or divorce your Republican husbands or something like that. And it was so funny because last night
love is love. Yeah. That's my response.
Last night I went to visit my parents, and they disagree on stuff politically, and they've been together for I think like close to 40 years, and just the idea that you can just make such a clean cut, like, ooh, we're going to split up and throw away what's probably like some really good human interactions and connections is insane. Oh, I'm sorry. Does Nick, do you want to say something?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was merely saying that after the midterms, you might be going to 2 separate Thanksgivings. I'm sorry to hear that. It's a burden for the children of divorced parents.
Right. And whatever happened to passion? Listen, I'm a left-wing black guy. Let me tell you something. I love a low-tax, low-government woman. We could get the passion. You know what I'm saying?
I think it works for dating nowadays. Like, I have friends who are like, I can't date this person, they're Republican. Like, I can't, but if you've been married for however many years and you've made it work this far, you got to find the way to make it work.
We made a video, we the internet. It's Hate F. A dating app, so you guys can spell out, the words. I'm trying not to curse, and it's a way to bring together, people all the way on the left and all the way on the right. They can get together and hate F each other.
Oh, they got any white nationalists on there? I would love to.
Oh yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Well, actually, I think that there's a whole series of videos that actually is that exact plot.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Big shout out to those websites.
Yeah.
The people who say that also, I I think some people who say that are able to manage relationships, but then other people, have friends on both sides of the political aisle where I'm like, okay, it sounds like you're not comfortable with disagreement at any point. Like, if you're going to make such claims, like, that's fine, I can respect that difference, but I'm going to need to see some evidence from you that you're able to, like, experience disagreement on some level and continue a relationship.
What, like if you need to prove that you're the type of couple that doesn't fight over where you're going to go to eat. Like, you can actually even get that.
Yeah, just something. And especially because a lot of that is like people who talk about like community, we want community, and it's like you don't speak to your immediate family and you want a community in this like improv school or whatever it is, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a dreamer. Because like all the people that I used to give, you know, like I would be like, give me a Bob Dole Republican, a John McCain Republican. We can talk, have a good time, have some coffee. We could make out. But Trump has messed that up now. Right? You know what I mean? Because
you can't even make out with John McCain anymore.
I can't make out with John McCain anymore, and he's
pretty sure McCain's not giving consent anymore.
No, yeah. Well, no, it's just polarized. There's no, you know, it's like the dissolving of all the gentlemen's agreements, we'll just not talk about this one issue. Like everything's politicized now to where it's like, you know, people are losing friends and family members out there. That's one thing where I actually thank God that I come from a working class, liberal, urban black family, because I haven't lost any family members about Trump. It was like we weren't necessarily politically divided, like, but I've seen like, you know, like for like my friends in the middle country, they've lost people, like uncles, you know, and it's all recent. It's not like this is, you know, there have been other Republican presidents. We've been through 9/11 together. We've been through the war in Iraq. We've been through Afghanistan. This is worse. This is worse. This is like 1960s type, you know, stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But can I ask, I mean, isn't that kind of screwed up? I mean, you were just rhapsodizing, you know, 9/11, Afghanistan, you know, the financial collapse.
Those were good times.
Those were good times. And now we have an idiot in the White House, and you know, I'm not a Trump voter, but I'm also not like a total Trump hater. But you know, what's he doing that is? Yeah, it just seems to me, I mean, all he's doing is causing fewer people to identify as Republicans and Democrats. According to Gallup, they're at or near historic lows. Only about 26% of people will say they're Republican now. About 28% say they're Democrat, and the rest say they're independent. So I think that's good. But it is like polarizing and pushing people out to the edges, but then they're becoming super dead enders. And they're the killjoys. I mean, I think we have to kind of isolate them and put them in camps, and then just get on with the rest of our lives.
Well, hey, Nick, what's it called? Do you want to plug your book? It sounded like you're.
I would say it's too old for that, but it was called the Declaration of Independence: How Libertarian Politics Can Fix What's Wrong with America. And you know, my colleague and I, Matt Welch, we were about 6 or 7 years ahead of the curve, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, here's something, you know, just bringing it back to, you know, comedians, and there's been a big turn where it seems like comedians as activists or activist comedy. Mm-hmm. And, you know, one question is, do comedians really think that they can affect change in the world? I do wonder that, because sometimes I look at, you know, if it's someone like Amy Schumer or Sarah Silverman or Patton Oswalt, I can imagine a bunch of people actually being turned off by them, like, and saying, you know what, I'm actually going to go to the other side because I'm not a fan of who you are. And I'm not saying that I like all three of them, but, you know, just think like how much good you're actually doing for your cause.
I think they don't care, and they're going to take that risk, because if you have that big of a platform and following and fans and you believe so hard in something, like, yeah, use it. Like, I know what you're saying. Like when Amy Schumer posts about voting on Instagram, like, you know, I don't think the people who, you know, aren't going to like her after that, like, she doesn't need them. She has enough fans. She'll continue on. She has enough fans, but I think she feels like, how can she not do that? I don't know. I'm a fan of it, and I think it has made me more political, knowing that, like, these other comics who I, like, look up to are using their platform to, like, get people to, you know.
Yeah, and I often think, I mean, if I had a platform like Amy Schumer, I mean, I would probably be drunk with power.
Right.
You know, just like probably literally drunk the whole time, every time I'm tweeting.
Because I bet if someone's like, hey,
Can I just say, if, you know, if Trump is the disease, then, you know, voting is the sickness, right? I mean, why would we want more people to vote if it's only going to end up with people like Trump?
Whoa.
I mean, we end up with different people than him.
I would say, less in terms of like specific causes, although, you know, throughout the history of the civil rights movement, I mean, people like Dick Gregory and actually Bill Cosby, you know, at various points lent their name and their power and their prestige to these movements, which is a good thing. But I think Dave Chappelle, you know, the 2 comedy specials that he released towards the end of last year, very beginning of this year on Me Too, as well as race, those were 2 of the most powerful. I mean, I think they were funny at times, but they were also really powerful essays on what's wrong with the country. And I love that kind of stuff. And that's, I guess, in a way you can say, you know, if to the extent that contemporary politics has given the pretext for that kind of work, and I think Chris Rock gets there some of the time. I think Amy Schumer used to, less so now that she's a movie star, Sarah Silverman, et cetera. But, you know, there's a lot of powerful stuff coming out, but not necessarily in terms of kind of message comedy.
No, I swear, yeah. It's like I got like, you know, I'm inspired by the generation before that, right? So it's like I think comedy can affect change. That's why I chose to become a political comedian, because I grew up watching Richard Pryor and George Carlin, right? You know what I mean? Like, and to me that was the tightrope. It was talking about divisive issues, but being able to make it funny and then to have a point was like the reason why I got into comedy, which is like the same reason why like. Now, when you see people that aren't funny and don't have a point, where you know it's just like, oh, this is like racism is bad, guys, and people just clap. It's like, yeah, no, racism is bad, but show why it's bad, and then have something funny about it. Yeah, give us a take. Yeah.
And I think more than anything, like, you know, bringing up Carlin and Pryor, and Chappelle as well. With figures like that, it's like no matter what the topic is, I'm pretty sure that they're going to have an interesting take on it, and I think that's super important too. Where it's like. You know, I don't have to agree with you in order to, you know, be enlightened by what I don't need to hear my own opinions fed back to me with maybe a punchline at the end of it.
You can also just see a difference between different comics who pursue that kind of material in how they carry themselves, and if they seem like a person who's inviting criticism and where it's a process where they're sharing their. Like, especially like Chappelle, like those specials, a lot of people criticized it, a lot of people found stuff that was wrong with it, but the way that he presented himself, he didn't feel like somebody who was lecturing anyone. He felt like somebody who was sharing his thoughts and sharing that process. And that's where comedy is like super valuable, because you're not just lecturing, you're not a professor, you're not just teaching people how the world should be, you're teaching like what it is to be a human being and think about these things, which is where, you know, Pryor and Carlin would connect with this kind of stuff. And I think that that's the big divide also, is there's political comedians who are lecturing people and saying, this is how I believe the world should be structured, and this is what I'm basing my humor around, versus this, when I think about these things, here's where my mind goes. And that sounds like somebody, like, people criticize Chappelle, and I'm sure he would have no issue hearing that criticism, because by the way that he's presenting the material, it just sounds like he's sharing his comedic ideas and his comedic take.
Also, his voice has gotten like the perfect amount of gravelly over the years, where he can say anything and it sounds like, man, there's so much gravitas behind what he's talking about.
You know who does a really good job, like you're saying, the just like what they're thinking in the moment. I think John Mulaney does a very good job of just kind of like, here's what's going on in the moment in my brain. Like, he just comes, you know, his stuff comes out of nowhere, but he's not lecturing you. Like,
yeah, I haven't heard him do a lot of political stuff.
But also the joke construction too. Yeah. Well, I guess this brings me to my next question. Maybe we've answered it already, but you know, when did we start looking to comedians for answers? You know, for news, you know, I think was it the Daily Show with Jon Stewart that really did, or was it, you know, happening beforehand? Nick, do you want to weigh in on that?
Well, yeah, you know, you mentioned Mort Sahl, who is one of the worst comedians, I think, of all time, but was influential.
Dude, we're starting some beef now. This is going to be like Eminem and who's the other?
Got a lot of 80-year-old fans tuning out right now.
Machine Gun Kelly.
Machine Gun Kelly and Eminem. That's Nick Gillespie and Mort Sahl.
Well, no, Mort Sahl, I think, was terrible. But I mean, the rise of kind of modern stand-up after World War II, you know, it's a post-war phenomenon. And, you know, Sahl certainly did it. Lenny Bruce did it. Although Lenny Bruce became exceptionally unfunny the more and more topical he got. And then a bunch of other. And I highly recommend, if you want to see, if you want to witness, and you can find it on YouTube, one of the worst albums of all time, Don Rickles did a like civil rights album where it's 28 minutes of him making
I had no idea
really
that existed.
Crappy ethnic stereotype jokes, and then at the end he's like, really, everybody, we've got to love each other or we're going to be in a world of hurt. It is so bad. but it became kind of de rigueur at a certain point, and I think you see it more and more now. But I don't think comedians, I don't think artists, I don't think movie makers. In a lot of ways, I love political commitment and I love politically charged entertainment, but they're almost always going to fail at it. But but when it works, it kind of works well. And I always push back against. I know a lot of conservatives and a good chunk of libertarians who are like, why does everything have to be political? And I guess this goes back to an earlier comment. It's, kind of because it is, and it's like we live in an age now where you're expected to live your commitments. I mean, you're expected to work your commitments. I'm a late baby boomer. I didn't have to deal with this shit growing up. But if you're a millennial or Gen Z, you're expected to have a job that actually reflects what you care about in the world as opposed to how to make money so you have something to do on the weekends. That's kind of a heavy lift, but it's going to show up in entertainment all the time.
I was gonna say I don't do political comedy like you were saying. I was like I try so hard not to do politics. It's just always been an area I'm either afraid to go into or. But since he became I just remember I did a show. This reminded me earlier, and I felt like, oh my God, I have to do politics now, at least during the debates. And I did this show at Caroline's, which is a midtown tourist crowd, right? A lot of middle America. These people are coming in ready for Trump, ready for I don't know, anything. And it was during the debates, and I made some joke about the fly that kept, it was on screen and it kept going on Hillary. I don't remember the exact joke, but it was something about a fly on the wall is even supporting Hillary, something. And it was obvious that I was rooting for Hillary, but I didn't go into anything else. It wasn't a huge thought-out joke. It didn't have a huge punchline, but I lost the audience in a second.
Just based on a fly-on-the-wall pun.
Yeah,
well, there was a whole family of flies just in the back. What do you mean by that?
But I felt that. I was like, oh my God, is this what we have to do? We have to do politics now? And you're saying, I'm like, I don't want to do my Don Rickles album. I don't want to do that album.
I don't want to make fun of the fat Chinese man in the front row.
That's my favorite act, though. I go, what about these blacks in the front? But really, guys, we should really support affordable housing.
Stop with the redlining. I'm tired of the redlining.
What are you, a Jew? But seriously, anti-Semitism's a real problem.
But seriously, folks.
It was just an immediate lose the room, and I was like, no, I don't do this kind of stuff. Want to hear about my mom? And it was like it couldn't come back.
But that's the way to do it is you have the fly on the wall, but then you also have the elephant in the room, if we're going to go with animal analogies here. But it is the type of thing where if something huge happened in the news that day, it's always this decision of it's on my mind, maybe it's on the other comics in the green room's mind. Is it really on this audience's mind? It's hard to say. It's really just feeling it out.
Or do they even want it?
Yeah, exactly. Or they're coming here to this show to escape it. They read it all day.
Yeah, exactly. More often than not, it feels in the green room oh man, I better bring this stuff up. Because when you're doing comedy in general, when you're going up on stage, you want it to feel of the moment. So whether it's of the political thing or something happened in the comic set beforehand, whatever it is, you want to bring it up, get everybody on the same page. And it feels like you need to do that with a political moment, whereas more often than not, it's just an illusion from being in the green room and being surrounded by other comics, when everybody out there is just no, we came here to get away from this. We just want to hear about your mom.
Right. But it's also we were saying earlier, people are afraid to promote their comedy right now. Everyone has this little sentence before, I know it's a bad time to say, come to my show tonight, but come to my show tonight. They're I know other things are more important today, but.
I will promote at any point. I promote right after a major terrorist attack.
Yeah, you have a story about that.
Right? Yeah, I did that. I was in.
How was that 9/11 show you did?
The 9/11. I go, forget you. You got something on your mind? Come see me at Wackies. No, actually, I promoted an appearance accidentally. I was in Africa at the time, and Mashable did a profile on me. I was like, yo, check it out. Mashable did a profile on me, and it was 20 minutes after those police officers were murdered in Dallas, and I didn't know. And I had to log back in and go, excuse me, I promoted something at an inappropriate time.
You being in Africa was very suspect,
Yes.
You giving your message from the safety of the motherland.
It was mentioned whether, it was maybe I was involved in some way.
Yeah. Well, with with We the Internet, we do a lot of political stuff, but I didn't really start doing political stuff in my stand-up act, for a while. And then when I did, it was me. I'm a libertarian. It was me making fun of libertarians. There was this, self-deprecating, sort of angle that I was taking on it, where I wonder if do Democrats and Republicans take themselves so seriously where they don't make fun of themselves? I mean, that's probably a stupid question to ask. I'm sure.
Ooh, I did a show one time because I don't take myself too seriously, and I come from like I have friends that are Republicans. I went to college. I came from I went to school in Central Missouri, so I don't take it serious. I enjoyed the back and forth, like I enjoy ideas and stuff like that. But they put me on this was pre-Trump actually, and this just shows you these worlds don't mix. They put me on at the Ventura Harbor Comedy Club in Ventura, California. Go support it.
Yeah, it's a good
they put me on the Left versus Right showcase.
Oh, wow.
And it was me versus a really rabid right-wing talk show host because, they just put anybody in comedy. So I go up there and try to actually entertain. Well, number one, the audience is already split. So I come up there and try to entertain.
How many people called the cops on you? Just from the audience.
He ended up making actually a bunch of wild accusations backstage. This guy was like a complete insane person. So you're just backstage. I'm like, hey man, good set. This is kind of weird, but it was did you have fun up there? And he ended up accusing me of being an anti-Semite, which was weird. I made no mention of, and I go, why are you accusing me? He goes, because all left-wing people hate the Jews. Wow. And it was like it'd be like if you took a white middle of the road comic and put him up there and then be like, all right, you're gonna go against Farrakhan.
Also, how many fucking Jews are? Sorry, I keep cursing. How many Jews are on the left? There's tons of Jews.
It was weird. It was weird. I was like, I don't know where that's coming from. I just said good set.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a good set. It was crazy.
This wasn't a roast show.
It wasn't and he thought it was war. I'm like, this is a comedy club. We're booked here to entertain the audience. Why are you accusing me of anti-Semitism backstage?
Oh my God.
So there are a lot of people that don't, especially, like road comics too. Like, when we say road comic, you know what I mean? Some of those guys take their persona really seriously and they don't appreciate anybody that pokes fun at themselves or anything like that,
How can you not, though, nowadays?
Well, it's just a hard way to live, but some people, for some reason, I don't know, using the word choice feels presumptuous, but I think there's obviously an element, either you believe in free will or not, and at a certain point, you have some sort of choice to, live in this manner that's just constantly going to be antagonistic. And also, I think some of the best ways to convince people is to take on, kind of the stupid view and have other people look and see oh, that's kind of is that how I appear? When they see a reflection of themselves, that's a better way to teach people, even if you're trying to teach something, than and nobody likes being lectured at.
Yeah.
Or even if I make fun of left-wing clapter, there's clapter now. This is the thing. I agree with criticism. I don't criticize it because I don't really talk about other people's acts or anything like that. But I get the criticism. Internally, I'm thinking sometimes.
Right.
And for some of those people, they because I don't even know if they see themselves as comedians. I think they see themselves as social leaders. But you could never make fun of how not funny that 10 minutes was. Right. You'd be like, man, you went 10 minutes without a joke there, and the audience is like...
And clapter is different from me saying, hey, guys, I just got married.
Yeah.
That's a little different as opposed to hey, guys, I'm against slavery. Yeah. I'm just going to come right out and say it.
So brave.
Yeah.
But are you single?
Right? They're like, rule 1, get the audience on your side, right?
Well, I wanted to read this quote that I came across. Noam Dworman, he's the owner of the Comedy Cellar in New York, and recently he did an interview with a Hollywood reporter. He was being interviewed because recently Louis C.K. had come back and performed at his club. And this quote from Noam really stood out to me. He says, I hate to say this, but there is a difference in what people will say, the nuances of a situation in private, and what they feel they're allowed to say in a black and white way in public. We're living in the dark ages of people having things they believe that they know they can't say out loud, and feeling that you have to come to a conversation with already the correct point of view. You're not allowed to discuss it, be wrong, be informed by someone else's opinion. Conversation is meaningless. Conversation in this day and age is just for two people to agree to talk about what they agree about. Just wanted to put that out there, because I wonder, has that attitude, for one, do you guys agree with that? And if so, has that attitude sort of found its way into comedy? Nick, do you want to talk about that a little?
Well, two things. One is I'm a political journalist by nature, so I kind of get to say whatever I want. But, I also have a shtick, so there's something to that. But I don't think there's any question. And again, just witnessing yesterday's Senate confirmation hearings with Brett Kavanaugh, or the last stage of that, absolutely true. I mean, there is a huge amount of false conversation that is going on about the Me Too movement or the Me Too moment, actually, and about how people really feel about this stuff. And I find it's as important as the gender divide is, the generational divide might even be bigger. And I think that's finding its way into comedy and into art more broadly, where people are just kind of fake and phony and they're not going deep. And that's why somebody like Chappelle, I thought, was deeply insightful and moving in his comments about Me Too. And I'll say this, and this I'm ripping off Sarah Siskind, who's a comedian, who said, the Louis C.K. set, that was a moment when he came back unannounced. If he had actually grappled with the reason why he has vacated the public stage, and if he had tackled it head on, that might not have just helped him come back, but it might have actually helped seal a rift that's going on. Not in the comedy community. I'm not part of that, and it's not my primary concern. But the country and the conversation about this, because there's a lot of bad shit that has happened, and there are a lot of conversations that need to be had, and we're not having them for, I think, some of the reasons why, the Comedy Cellar guy I think he's on target with that.
Well, I agree with it to a certain point, but I also think it's important as a comedian that when there has to be, with the Louis situation, we got to keep in mind that these are workplace things that targeted female comedians that were his subordinates. And it wasn't always consensual. And so for him to appear in a workplace unannounced. So for instance, if I jerk off at Burger King and then I show up unannounced at that Burger King 9 months later, like some people are going to have a problem with that, right?
Only some people.
Only some people, yeah.
You're saying if you're the manager of that Burger King, then that's a totally different situation.
Well, yeah, no, and I think, and the argument, should he never work again? I think that's a fair debate that people should have. No one was saying that. It's just the idea. It's precisely what you said. He didn't address it, right? And
who wants to hear a joke from Louis C.K. until he actually starts talking about that?
That's what I'm saying. Because what I think what the Me Too thing is that there's no acknowledgement. There's no, I messed up, I'm sorry, this is what I've learned. It was just like, even his apology was messed up because he actually blamed female admiration for his actions. And that, again, that's not the point. And so I think people are fair to have pushed back against that. Also, as a comedy club owner, you can have whoever you want on your stage, but I think it's also important for us to ask owners of comedy clubs to ask female staff members and female comedians about how they feel about having someone like that in the workplace.
Yeah, and I would just say I would recommend anyone who's listening to go read the full interview with Noam, because he does bring up how it was a drop-in, he wasn't there that night, and also had he known about it, there's a way he would have gone about it that I think is was pretty on point.
He just walked in. I forgot.
No, wasn't there. He walked in.
He walked in.
Basically to the host was like, let me get up, and then the host is in an impossible situation at that point.
Yeah.
Or not impossible, depending on your opinion on it, obviously.
Yeah.
And it puts the young female talent in an impossible position too, because Louis draws money to the business. So as a female comedian, you don't draw the money that he draws. So can you really, even if you have reservations, how comfortable do you feel? Depends on your relationship with the management. So that's,
tough.
It's a tough situation, and it's just, I think if there was the talk and there was the acknowledgement, like, who the good example is who did the right thing? Letterman. Letterman had a Me Too thing before Me Too. He came out on the air, talked about what he learned, why it was creepy and everything, and now nobody brings it up.
I didn't even know.
Was that the one with the kid?
With the intern. He was with the interns in the closet and all that stuff. And he had it, everyone had forgotten about it. That was the way you actually handle these things, because then women and men, you can have a reconciliation.
But like you said, it was before Me Too, so there's just a different gravitas to it. I think back to the question, the idea that people will say different things privately and publicly. On the one hand, there's nothing abnormal about that. I have chat threads that if they were released to the public under the wrong context, I'd be banned from comedy in modern society, because I might be talking to a friend of mine and be like, oh yeah.
No, you don't have to
don't say it.
You don't have to say what you say to your friend.
We're on national TV.
But you know what I mean? There's a context that happens when I'm talking to my close friends. There's an assumption that, like, we both know we're not hateful people, and there might be a joke that somebody will make at the expense of whatever, but it's like, okay, we understand. And then there's certain people that don't understand that when you have an audience or when you have other people there, everybody doesn't know that you're a good guy. Everybody doesn't know that you're saying this ironically or that whatever else it is. And I honestly can't imagine that there are people out there that are able to put the kind of thoughtfulness into their words around, like, how do you even have close relationships if you have to every time do this extra work when you communicate of making sure that every word is like okay with everybody. It's just not an efficient, you know what's a great way to find this out is playing like charades or one of those games where somebody has to guess it quickly. You'll find out real quick people who normally are real careful with their words when like, you have 5 seconds to make sure everybody knows this person you're talking about, and normally you're real considerate. Now you're like, oh, fat lady, what, you know what I mean? Like, you just want to get to the point, and sometimes the point is to communicate effectively and not communicate in a way where everybody knows that you're on the right side of everything.
Also, I would probably, a bit of advice to anyone who's online. If you're on Facebook and somebody posts, like, I believe Dr. Ford, that's probably not the best opportunity for you to say, no, I believe Brett Kavanaugh, and vice versa. That kind of a conversation is not going to go anywhere, and it's not going to go to a good place if you're having it online.
Don't you think also, like you're saying, like, you can have these conversations with the people you're close with, people who trust you and know you, but so many people are just writing like, I believe her, and they're like, wow, I'm good for the year, like, woof, I got that off my chest. Right. Everyone knows I'm a good person now. It doesn't matter what I say. Right. Like, it's just so funny how we're using that, the news feed and social media as like people are like it's not enough.
A virtue signal.
Yeah, in a way. It's like cathartic to all of these people.
I think Norm Macdonald brought up the topic where just hating Trump isn't a political position, or it doesn't make you a good person. I have this bit I'm working on where it's sort of like Donald Trump is the Jesus Christ of our era because, love Jesus and your sins are forgiven. Hate Trump and your sins are forgiven. In some weird way.
No, I think, I'll tell you where I do agree with Noam, though. I mean, like, I agree with that basic sentiment. Like, I have cases where I just I'll give an example. I didn't agree with the Aziz thing when it came out. I felt it was wrong. I had a bunch of evidence on why I thought it was wrong, and I was 100% afraid. The railroad on him was actually scary. That was a time where I was scared of my peers. And I actually saw it online, people going after people that had a differing opinion. Right. Like, I actually saw it. Like, it was like mobilizing against people. And some of these things are people's personal relationship, and it takes its way on these things. But I will say that was a time where I was actually scared of my left-wing peers. I'm like, this thing is not fair. This is not what this is. This is bad. This is don't do this. This is not this is going to be used against you, by the way, later on.
And that's outside of politics. I think that's just as far as like, listen, whatever your politics are, just check yourself often enough to make sure you're not being an asshole. Because even people who are wrong, I've seen on Facebook threads where like somebody who's like a stupid right-wing perspective, like posts something, and then like 15 people just viciously, and it's like, have some mercy. Like, this person is wrong, but like, what are you doing right now? You're literally just like letting your shit out. And like, I get it, but like, that's the whole context thing. Like, Believe Women is a great example of that because it means very different things to different people. Mm-hmm. And to part of society, it means a statement that women have dealt with a lot of shit. And when you have this environment, you need to understand that when somebody comes forth with some sort of allegations that they're coming into this context of a world, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have another part of society that's like, well, what do you mean? What, are we supposed to develop a justice system under the preponderance that every woman doesn't lie? What if one woman accuses another woman? What? Obviously, nobody on the left is saying that, but it just goes to one of those two perspectives, and it's like you need to be able to communicate beyond those two cartoonish 2D, like, manifestations of that phrase.
Nick, so yeah, in recent memory we have obviously Louis C.K., but we have Roseanne and we have Norm Macdonald. All of them, 3 different cases, but 3 people who have evoked, public outrage and public scrutiny.
Norm is such a different case.
Norm is, oh yeah, I feel a little bad putting him in this. But actually, Noam from the Comedy Cellar has brought this up, quite a bit. The idea of not necessarily knowing what the rules are, and I think
it's generational.
But what I mean rules are like sort of like public forgiveness. I would say, at what time has somebody been punished enough, and in what way that they are, let back into the fold. So I think you brought up a good point about.
You guys would know better than me because I suspect that you follow this industry closely. But somebody like Aziz Ansari, it turned. I think most people reading that story, and when that story came out, it's the type of story as a journalist or as an editor I wouldn't have run, because fundamentally I don't think there was any kind of public issue at stake there. It was a bad date story, and Aziz may have acted like a dick at various points, but he stopped. He didn't contravene most, like any more. I mean, it wasn't a Louis C.K. situation. I don't think it should have been put out there, but is he coming back or not? And what does he have to do that, as opposed to somebody like Louis C.K.? And then you have actual monsters like Harvey Weinstein or Bill Cosby, who, they're not coming back, or Mario Batali, the chef, for reasons that are kind of understandable. And it seems to me that, something like the Aziz Ansari case is one of these tests of where, it undermines his lovable persona, but it's also not actionable in the same way that I think a lot of this other, a lot of the other behavior is.
Yeah, I think yeah.
Oh no, I was gonna say I'm glad that story came out, and I was like, I've seen this before, and it just was like, he's using his power. I don't know. I hated reading that, and I don't watch his show anymore. I don't care for him, and I just am like.
I mean, to be honest, the second season of Master of None was not good.
No, thank you. It wasn't.
No, it's hard to separate some, and it might just be that if this story had come out after the first season, which was pretty good, we'd be having a slightly different conversation about him. But it's you never know what you do that's just going to kind of bump you off the stage of public interest.
That story definitely. And I'm not the first person to point it out, but it read a lot like revenge porn in a way, especially like the details of it. And I think one part of the story that is often overlooked is she was on a date with a dude, like when she gave him the number and stuff. So in a way, a man using his power and his celebrity. I guess it works, at least to open the door.
Well, I mean, I see. My position is I don't think that should have come out, and then also the way Babe behaved sort of confirmed the suspicions. I don't know if you saw with Ashley Bamfield, they attacked her.
Yeah, can you talk? Tell us about who Ashley Bamfield is.
Bamfield, veteran journalist, and she represents sort of second wave feminism, right? Where she's like, what, I'm 40, honey. We've been through some shit. This was just a bad date. And they were like, well, you are old and irrelevant, and you are ugly, and you are stupid, your highlights. Yeah, it was. Yeah. But I get what you're saying, though, because the good part that came out of the Aziz thing, right, was to get a sense, right, the Me Too thing, right, we have there's people that want Me Too only to be about sort of the most monstrous behaviors, like, oh, we got Bill Cosby. But what you're talking about is like the microaggressions. Sure. It was good to make you think about how you've behaved on dates, the culture that you come into, and the way you approach women and things like that. You know what I mean? But I was just saying that I think it was good for that conversation. I didn't know I don't think it was fair to Aziz to be the guy to have to sacrifice his privacy and all that for that conversation, because he didn't do anything that was. Yeah. It was just creepy, or you know what I mean? It's stuff that women have all dealt with, and it's a good conversation to have. But he didn't do anything criminal. He always, every time she makes a verbal request, he abides by it.
Also, there's something too about just seeing his name kind of thrown around, in articles. I read one recently. I don't know if you had forwarded it to me, but T.J. Miller had gone to an open mic recently, and the hosts of the open mic were trying to figure out how to deal with this guy and whatnot. And within that whole thing, there was a throwaway line about Aziz, and it was like, wait a minute, I don't know much about the T.J. Miller thing, but I think there was actually domestic violence or something like that, and then just kind of like putting Aziz in there for somebody who didn't read the original Babe.net article, and someone who isn't going to read it, you're still linking him to something that I think is very different, and I think it does a disservice.
Well, he was brought up after we're talking about Louis C.K. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, exactly. So, I mean, first of all, there's no putting the genie back in the bottle, you know? So, like, he's being talked about in this conversation. It's not going to stop. He is touring, actually, and if you look at his Instagram, my girlfriend sent me this. She's like, oh, boy. And you look at his Instagram, and it's like, see me in this city. Are you going to talk about your sexual assaults? Are you going to talk about your sex? And then he didn't assault any. And it's just like people argue in the comments of his stuff. And I think that, right, it is important to say they're not all the same. There's nuance to it. But then if you're going to talk about the nuanced situations, you have to be able to talk about it in a nuanced way. And also, if you're going to have any kind of philosophy or ideology or try to have some way of thinking about this stuff, it has to have some way of acknowledging bad faith examples. And that's like something that I feel like every ideology right now and every side is having trouble figuring out how to do is how do you acknowledge the fact that there will be bad faith examples in whatever movement and whatever ideology, and how do you deal with it? Do you address it? Do you just stick to your guns and say nobody's ever, who believes what I believe is ever going to do any harm? Nobody's ever going to try to exploit whatever it is I believe about the world? Like there has to be some way to discuss it, whether you believe that the Babe.net article is an example of that, or not, but can an example of that exist? What does that look like? How do we address it when that happens, you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was good. I mean, it was good seeing the reactions. Like, I mean, I'd say for me, I mean, I work, you know, we're in comedy. We have like how many female peers, right? You know, so it was good reading the test. Four. Well, there's like 4 that make it, but there's like,
and we don't think they're that funny.
Yeah,
they're not funny.
It's the percentage of this panel. No.
It's actually, I think, overrepresented.
No.
Overrepresented.
But it's the way. But yeah, it's all about the ways you use the internet too. Because even if you disagree with that example, if you read 1,000 testimonies from your peers that you respect, you know what I mean? Like, and you have to have a level of self-reflect. It's how people use the internet. Now people use the internet to be on a team and stuff like this. I use the internet for like, wow, I just read 1,000 personal stories. I'm gonna think about how this relates to me, because I think that was the thing that made the Aziz thing so touchy. Is like every guy got defensive because we've all pulled some form of that move on a date. You know what I mean?
The claw, the literal claw.
Not the claw, but we may have like somebody may have pointed, or it may have been a thing where you know what I mean. Like guys have done thirsty things on dates, and so when thirst got put up on the table, that's where guys, you know, the implication was so broad, and then women have been in a situation where they felt like they couldn't express themselves against thirst. Is what
I guess, and now you guys have learned that's not okay.
Yeah.
Like if anything, hopefully someone learned something.
But I hope it also means, though, at the same time, you know what I mean? That means that women should like be able to express themselves, like whatever that social conditioning and that fear and like, because you know people are saying I'm trained to apologize. Like now, express yourself, get it clear, so we don't have like the misunderstandings, right? Because I don't think anybody with the Aziz thing came in with malicious intent, honestly. Yeah. I think she thought she was going to be a star's girlfriend. He thinks he's going to hook up with another hot chick.
Totally. Yeah. I think that a big part of that is also the thing I saw a lot of guys do, which was like, come on, bro, which is like a lot of times when whoever, women or men, express something that's happening with this kind of conversation online, the goal isn't to start arguing with people in the comments. The goal is to share an experience and to get support from other people and understand that you're not alone in that experience. And then you have guys coming into to the comments trying to have like a debate over the kind of conversation that we're having now. But that's not the context. I've seen it a lot, and I probably, if I look at my Facebook from 8 years ago or something, can find examples of myself doing it. And it's one of those things where you see somebody else doing the ugly thing, and you see a reflection of yourself, and you're like, oh, okay, I see. And that I kind of learned not to do that by seeing other guys and seeing how bad it looks when somebody has a really personal, vulnerable story. And the context right now is not to discuss how the justice system should, like, in the end, handle this type of thing.
I think it is an opportunity to grow, you know, because I'm 36. I'm very different than when I was 26 or when I was 16 and all that. And I think it's really important as
you know when you're
46,
you're going to be the same old piece of shit, Lou.
But I'm going to sit down when I pee.
I got news for you.
I've had this beard since 6, and
so I guess we're almost at the hour mark, and I want to let you guys go. And so I think for the last question, I'm just wondering. In a world that seems so divided, or maybe literally is so divided, do you think there's a way for comedy to bring people back together?
Sure. I think all art brings people back together in a certain way. I mean, like, yeah, we're going through this hypersensitive time, and people are afraid to say certain jokes, and because they know they're going to divide the room or divide, I don't know, your followers or whatever. But yeah, I think we have to believe, as comics, I hope that we can unite people. I think that's like the goal. Like,
definitely want audience members.
Yeah, but
if I can say, I partly because of there's a slight time delay on the Skype thing, but I thought that you had said Walmart brings people together.
All art.
And Walmart, which is sponsoring our show.
Really does bring people together. And no, but yeah, there are times I think when comedy can. And I was thinking, Lou, when you had asked me to be on the show and you talked about what we were going to be discussing, I never was that big an Adam Sandler fan. I became a more appreciative of him actually as I got older and as his movies kind of got worse. And you start to realize the early stuff is good. Compared to the bad, the later stuff. But after 9/11, he appeared at one of the major concerts for New York, and he did the Opera Man bit from Saturday Night Live, which was god awful. I mean, I never liked it when he was doing it on Saturday Night Live, but it was a great, like, absurdist bit after 9/11. And I think there are moments like that where that can happen. I don't know that we're going to get there, because of what's driving us apart now is not one clean episode of horror or terror or anything like that. And I think we need a fundamental reset. I forget who was talking about good faith and bad faith. Like, we are living in a spectacular age of bad faith arguments where the court, 25% of us who are Republican, 25% who are Democrats are just trying to run the entire conversation, and it's almost all in bad faith. And that's got to change. And I don't know if comedy's up to it. I don't know if art's up to it. I think it might have to, it's got to come from all of those places and a lot more.
Don't you think that that's why we're living through the age of reboot right now, right? Like, especially with comedies, everyone's like, we can't have anything new anymore. No one has anything interesting to say. Like, give us our old sitcoms. That's all we care. That's all we want. With
Cedric the Entertainer as the lead in it. Yeah. But what do you think?
No, I've given up on trying to bring people together. This is the era of segmented marketing and the internet. I'm going after my audience now. My new album will be called Kill the White Man. I will be touring only in Gary, Indiana.
Damn it, my album's supposed to be called Kill the White Man, and really pull that rug out.
It's the most self-deprecating album whatsoever. It ends with a suicide.
Mine is just called Woman. Yeah. Comedy Woman.
Well, there, recently on the Joe Rogan Experience, Jeffrey Miller was on. Jeffrey Miller is I think, I don't know if he's a psychiatrist or he's at least a professor of psychology. And something
like an evolutionary psychology.
Yeah. And something that he pointed out that resonated with me, he said that, from his perspective, he's trying to understand the phenomenon of social media and Twitter and all that. And he said the same people who are arguing and just lashing out at each other on Twitter are also the same people who are enjoying shows like Ozark on Netflix, where it's sort of like, here's a great show. It's an amazing thing. We can go and we can kill each other in social media and then come back and enjoy this piece of art. So I haven't watched the show.
I haven't either.
But
I've heard great things.
I like Ozark.
You heard great things right here.
If I can point out too, one of the things it's a great show. The second season dropped recently. Definitely worth watching. But Jason Bateman, who is phenomenal in it. He also he was part of a commercial where he said that, as part of his obeisance to Obama being president, he would only flush the toilet after taking a number 2. He was part of that awful celebrity ad celebrating the arrival.
I pledge or something like that.
And it's like, it's kind of amazing that, somebody, and I mean, this is something, my background's in literature. You can be a horrible human being and you could literally be a Nazi like Louis Ferdinand Céline and be a great writer. And, it gets complicated. Like, we should, actors, athletes, politicians, they are not role models.
The Céline reference, did he write Journey to the End of the Night?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Death on the Installment Plan.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, even his titles are fucking great. Even his titles are great, but he's a total Nazi.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, on that note, if even a Nazi...
No.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you guys for tuning in and watching our very first live stream. We had a few technical issues at the beginning, but we got up and running, and I really hope that you enjoyed the conversation. Please like, share, subscribe, and watch more of our videos. And please like, share, and subscribe to everything that all of our panelists were doing. We're going to go around. You guys can give some plugs. How about you start off?
Sure. My Twitter handle @TheBorisK. And if you're in New York, next Wednesday, October 3rd, at the Red Room at KGB Bar, 7 o'clock, I'm hosting a show. I got Mark Norman headlining. I got a MTA writer. I have Kos Marty, who did the Con Body workout. It's a super fun show.
And you can all, try to figure out what the hell that show's about, because that's an interesting line.
It's like a late night style show. Thank you for clarifying.
You can go to my website, justinwilliamscomedy.com. If you send me an email, I'll come to your house.
All right.
Yeah. You can find me at Unemployed Anna on Twitter and on Instagram. Subscribe to my show, The Unemployed Show, on Facebook. And yeah, come catch me doing stand-up live. It's just annaroisman.com.
Cool. And Nick?
Yeah, I'm at Nick Gillespie at Twitter. Please follow it, and go to reason.com for the best in libertarian politics, culture, and ideas.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Nick.